Have you ever felt just utterly exhausted by being pulled between two extremes?
Oh, constantly.
Right. I mean, really
Uh,
torn, like between the intense demands of your work and the desperate need for rest.
yeah, or making a decision with cold, calculating logic
Yeah.
versus trusting raw, messy emotion.
Exactly. Or maybe it's just the constant daily tug of war between needing structure in your life and, craving absolute chaos.
It's a lot.
It is genuinely exhausting to live in that middle space. But what if that tension you are feeling right now isn't actually a problem to be solved?
Right.
What if that exact friction is the cosmic machinery required to create reality itself?
It's a profound shift in how we view our daily struggles, really.
Hmm.
I mean, we spend the vast majority of our lives trying to resolve that tension.
Yeah, we read self-help books, we meditate.
Exactly. We try to get back to some peaceful, unified state where nothing opposes us.
Yeah.
But the material we are unpacking today argues something quite jarring. Well, if you actually achieve that absolute frictionless unity you're chasing, you wouldn't find peace. You would cease to exist entirely.
And that sets the exact mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring the curated notes of researcher Ben Hod on the Eliphas Levi School of High Magic curriculum.
Right.
Specifically, we are looking at Map 2, Unit 1, which has the very unassuming title of simply Duality.
Yeah, just duality. But it's so much more than that.
It really is, and I want to give you a fair warning right out of the gate here. We are moving far past, spooky spellbooks, bubbling cauldrons, and medieval superstitions today.
Oh, absolutely.
We are treating magic as the precise, rigorous mathematics of consciousness.
I love that phrasing.
Right. So our goal is to figure out why absolute unity is actually a dead end, and why polarity, that exhausting tension pulling you apart, is the essential engine of all manifestation.
And, to really grasp the mechanics of this engine, we have to look at the architectural foundation of the universe.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So in the esoteric traditions, Levi is synthesizing, which heavily feature Kabbalah, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism. We have to start by looking at how the abstract concept of two physically manifests. We have to look at the actual blueprint of reality.
Right, because before you have two, you just have one.
Yeah.
You have the absolute unity of the number one, the monad, a state where everything is just perfectly mashed together with no distinction at all.
Precisely. In the Pythagorean and Hermetic traditions, the number two is called the dyad.
The dyad, right.
And the dyad represents the very first terrifying step away from primordial oneness. The moment you introduce two, you introduce division.
You introduced reflection.
And most importantly, opposition. If we look at the Hebrew alphabet, the second letter is Beth.
Okay.
Beth literally translates to house, or domus in Latin. And this concept of the house leads us to the iconic image of the two mythical pillars standing at the porch of King Solomon's temple.
Ah, Jachin and Boaz.
Jachin and Boaz, exactly.
Now, these aren't just decorative architectural features to make the temple look intimidating, right?
No, far from it. In 19th century French occultism, these columns are the literal gears of the universe.
Wow.
Jachin is the white pillar. It represents mercy and active masculine force.
Okay, and the other one?
Boaz, which corresponds to that letter Beth and the concept of the house, is the black pillar. It represents severity and passive feminine form.
Got it.
The fundamental assertion here is that physical manifestation is entirely impossible without this dualism. You cannot perceive light unless there is a background of darkness to define its edges.
That makes sense.
And you cannot transmit a force unless there is a resisting medium to carry the current. These columns represent the inescapable law of universal polarity.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because abstract concepts like active force and passive form, or mapping mercy to a white pillar, they can get very slippery and vague.
They really can.
So let's look at the Kabbalistic interplay here to ground it. The sources talk about chokmah, which is the second emanation on the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Right, representing supreme wisdom.
Yes, this primordial active intellect, the initial flash of creation. If we're treating this like the physics of consciousness, I imagine chokmah as the raw, unbridled current coming directly from a power plant. Like, it's pure voltage.
That is a very apt way to ground the concept.
Yeah.
It is pure, undirected potential.
But pure voltage on its own doesn't actually do anything useful, right? I mean, if you just have a live wire of raw force, it arcs, it sparks, it creates chaos, and then it dissipates.
Yeah, it's totally destructive.
To actually do work to light a room or power a motor, you need a circuit. You have to run that current into something that resists it.
Yes, you need the appliance. You need the resistor.
Exactly. So if chokma is the raw voltage of active force, it absolutely needs domus. It needs the house.
The container.
Right. It needs the passive matrix of Boaz, which in Kabbalah corresponds to Bina, the feminine principle of understanding. Bina is the wiring, the transformer, the tungsten filament inside the light bulb.
I love the filament analogy.
Because the resistance, the actual physical restriction of the form, is what forces that raw power to slow down, build up heat, and glow. That resistance is what creates the light.
What's fascinating here is how that analogy takes us much closer to the truth of Levy's mechanics. Because think about chokma.
Okay.
It is the supreme masculine active force, yet it corresponds to the number 2, which traditionally aligns with the feminine passive pillar.
Oh, wait, why the crossover?
Because true wisdom, which is the literal translation of chokma, is the sudden realization that raw power is completely useless without a container.
Oh, wow.
Right? Wisdom is recognizing the necessity of the house. This intersection of force and form of the live wire and the resistor splits the universe into these columns of the temple.
So you really can't have one without the other.
No, if you only have one column, if you have infinite voltage with no wiring, or a complex wiring grid with no power, the temple collapses.
You just have a pile of useless parts.
Precisely. The friction between the two is what holds the roof up. It is the only way a universe can sustain itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. If this duality, this split between a live wire and a resistor, is the necessary architecture of reality, how did the circuit get built?
That's a big question.
Right. Like, how did we transition from a state of primordial, peaceful oneness into this highly polarized, high-stakes state?
Well, Levy uses humanity's oldest origin story to explain this mechanism, but he reads it in a completely unorthodox way. He goes to the Adam and Eve metaphor from the book of Genesis.
Right, but he doesn't use the traditional Sunday school reading, does he?
No, he focuses on a very specific anatomical detail in the Hebrew text. The traditional reading is that Eve was created from Adam's rib. But the original Hebrew word used in Genesis is tsela.
Sella, okay.
Yeah, and while it can be translated as rib, it more accurately refers to a flank, a side, or the chest cavity, the literal space of the heart.
Wait, so he's not talking about some minor surgical bone extraction here. He's talking about a fundamental splitting of a single primordial entity right down the middle of its core.
Yes, exactly.
But why pull Eve from the chest? That sounds violent.
By pulling Eve from the chest, Levy is positioning the creation of the second principle as a profound emotional and energetic polarization. In the occult framework, this is the birth of the astral light.
Okay, we need to define the astral light because that sounds like a spooky ghost dimension. And earlier we promised the mathematics of consciousness.
Fair point, fair point. In Levy's framework, the astral light is not a magical fairy realm.
Good to know.
It is the omnipresent electromagnetic fluid of consciousness that permeates everything. It is the medium through which all thoughts and forces travel. Think of it like a magnetic field.
Okay, a magnetic field.
But a magnetic field cannot exist without a positive and a negative pole. So the splitting of Adam and Eve is the creation of the positive and negative charges of this fluid.
Ah, the active and passive currents.
All right, which occultists call ob and odd. If Eve remains inside Adam, if they never split, you have unity, sure. But it is a sterile, solipsistic cosmic sleep. Nothing can be perceived. Nothing can happen.
Wait, so is Levy saying that the separation of the subject and the noble object isn't a tragic fall from grace that we need to apologize for, but rather the necessary stage for magic to even work?
That is exactly it. It is the only way it can function. Unity isn't dividing to destroy itself or degrade its divine essence. It is multiplying itself to create.
Multiplying itself to create. I love that.
And there is a profound linguistic secret hidden in this exact concept within Kabbalah. The Hebrew word for one, eshad, shares the exact same numerical value as the word for love, ahava.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Isn't it? To create is to purposefully make room for another.
That completely changes how you look at the world.
It does. And to really understand how radical Levy's framing is, we have to look at one of his major philosophical influences, the 18th century mystic Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin.
Okay, what did he believe?
Saint-Martin believed that humanity was a fallen king wandering in exile through a universe of fragmented, dualistic shadows. He spent his whole life mourning this distance from the divine oneness.
Just like weeping over the lost unity.
Exactly. But Levy takes this melancholic passive mysticism and injects it with absolute adrenaline.
He's basically telling the practitioner to stop crying over spilled milk.
He is. Levy agrees with Saint Martin that the material world is a dualistic mirror house. But instead of weeping over the distance between the human soul and the divine source, Levy claims that this exact distance creates the friction necessary to generate magical force.
So we don't mourn the fragmentation.
No, we weaponize it. The Magus is taught to actively weaponize the distance between the subject and the object to exert their will.
Weaponize the distance. I want to connect this directly back to you, the listener, right now. Think about the friction you feel in your daily life. The tension with people who oppose you, the push and pull of responsibilities just trying to get through the day.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
What Levy is suggesting is that this is not a glitch in the matrix. That friction is the exact tension needed to generate the astral light. It is the apparatus of your own creation. You need the polarity to spark the current of your life.
But here's the catch.
There's always a catch.
Operating as a live wire in this dualistic world, constantly exposed to the friction between the subject and the object, presents a massive existential danger.
Because if you don't handle the current correctly, you get fried.
Exactly. So how do we actually acquire knowledge and navigate this polarized state without letting the opposing forces tear us apart?
Right. How do we survive it?
This brings us to a critical epistemological war that Levy was waging in mid-19th century France.
The battle between science and gnosis.
Precisely. You see, Levy was writing in a culture that was violently tearing itself apart. On one side, you had rigid Catholic dogma demanding absolute blind faith.
Right.
On the other side, you had the rise of aggressive secular positivism, the belief that everything could be reduced to purely material, observable data.
Just hard science.
Yeah. And in the middle of this war, Levy drops an explosive definition. He says, science is the complete and absolute possession of the truth.
You know, to modern ears, that sounds totally reasonable. That sounds like a standard defense of the scientific method.
It does, until you look at the etymology and the psychological intent behind it. The word science comes from the Latin scire, which means to divide, to separate, to cleave apart.
Oh, I see.
It is a clinical, categorizing form of knowing.
It's an act of dissection.
That is exactly what it is. It's an aggressive, almost hubristic claim to total cognitive mastery over the universe. It implies a subject, the scientist, coldly staring at a static, dead object.
But the universe isn't dead.
No. Levy warns that the astral light is a living, fluid current. If you approach this living universe with the arrogant desire for objective, static possession, the science will eventually possess you.
Wow.
The rigidity of your own categories will drag you down into delusion because the universe is constantly moving. He contrasts this dead dissection with the concept of gnosis.
The Greek term, right.
Yes, gnosis, derived from know.
This is an intuitive, experiential realization. It entirely bypasses the clanking, separating machinery of logical deduction.
Okay, so it's a completely different way of knowing.
Entirely. If we go back to the Kabbalistic tree of life, gnosis corresponds to the secret hidden sphere called Dath, which literally translates to knowledge.
But Dath isn't a normal sphere on the tree, right? No, it is often called the non-sephira. It is not a fixed place. It is a bridge over the abyss of the mind. Dath is the invisible child born from the perfect union of Chokmah, the act of wisdom, and Bina, the passive understanding.
So what does this all mean practically? Let me try to map this out with an analogy.
Go for it.
Science, in the Latin scire sense of separation, is like aggressively dissecting a frog on a laboratory table to understand how biology works. You cut it open, you get all the data, you categorize all the organs, you measure the leg muscles.
Map everything out.
But at the end of the day, the frog is dead. The living essence of what made it a frog is completely gone. You've successfully separated and divided to master it, but you've lost the truth of the organism.
Exactly.
Gnosis, on the other hand, is diving into the pond and swimming with the frog. You experience the water, the temperature, the movement, the entire ecosystem intuitively. You collapse the artificial distance between the observer and the observed.
That perfectly illustrates the difference in mechanisms. Science freezes the current so it can hold it in its hand. Gnosis steps into the current and rides it.
But wait, if claiming objective science over the universe is the ultimate magical error, how does the initiate actually achieve this gnosis? I mean, swimming in the pond sounds great in theory, but as we established earlier, the pond is filled with high-voltage electrical currents.
Right. It's dangerous.
How do you swim in it without drowning or getting electrocuted?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look back at the architecture of the temple we started with. The answer is hidden between the pillars.
Ah, Shechin and Boaz.
Yes. To avoid being dragged down into delusion by the opposing forces of reality, the initiate must literally embody the archetype of the high priestess from the tarot. You must stand exactly in the dead center between the white pillar of Jachin and the black pillar of Boaz. Gnosis is achieved strictly through perfect equilibrium.
So you absolutely cannot pick a side.
If you pick a side, you die. Metaphorically, yes. If you are pulled blindly to the white pillar of pure, active mercy and formlessness, your identity dissolves into the void. If you are pulled blindly to the black pillar of absolute severity and rigid material form, you are crushed under the weight of dogma.
Wow.
The house of the Magus is built entirely on the mastery of opposites. You do not destroy the pillars. You do not try to merge them into one gray pillar. You stand suspended between them to grasp the light.
I hear that, but maintaining that perfect razor-edge balance between two massive opposing forces requires a mindset from the aspiring magus that, frankly, sounds like an impossible contradiction.
It's definitely an epistemological crisis.
Yeah, Levy hits the reader with this brutal, almost mocking baseline rule for the initiate. He says, what does man actually know? Nothing, but he is not permitted to ignore anything.
It is a devastating paradox to place on a student.
I have to push back on this because this sounds like an exhausting Socratic trap. How can the listener possibly empty their mind into nothingness while simultaneously being tasked with obsessively devouring and classifying everything in the universe without ignoring a single thing?
It sounds impossible.
If my hard drive is completely wiped, how am I supposed to download the entire internet without my brain catching fire?
Your frustration is exactly what Levy wants the student to feel.
Yeah.
It forces you to rethink what knowing means. Let's break the paradox down into its two weights on the scale.
Okay.
First, he knows nothing.
Yeah.
This connects directly to the profound Kabbalistic concept of ayin, which translates to divine nothingness. It is the supreme zero that precedes all manifestation.
So it's not about being stupid or uneducated or just plain dumb?
Not at all. It is a strict structural necessity for the magic to work. To know nothing means intentionally, ruthlessly cleansing your mind of cultural baggage, religious dogma, political bias, and sensory illusions.
Why do you have to do that?
Because the astral light acts as a giant, highly reactive cosmic mirror. If you bring your pre-existing biases and fears into a magical operation, the current will simply reflect your own delusions back at you, magnifying them until they destroy you.
Oh, that makes total sense.
You have to scrub the vessel clean so the unfiltered reality of the universe can funnel through your will. It is the old Neoplatonic idea that the ultimate truth can only be reached through a state of unknowing.
Okay, I understand the mechanics of wiping the hard drive, deliberately emptying the cup so it can be filled. But what about the second half of that mandate? He is not permitted to ignore anything.
Right.
The French word he uses, ignorer, carries so much weight, it implies a deliberate turning away, a willful, cowardly blindness.
And that is the heavy balancing weight on the other side of the scale. This rule pulls deeply from the gritty, dangerous traditions of the old grimoires.
It's a spell book.
Right. In classical esoteric systems, the sorcerer cannot simply dismiss a demon, an adverse spirit, or a terrifying intelligence just because it makes them uncomfortable. You must summon it, name it, classify its nature, and integrate it into your understanding of the cosmos.
You can't just run away from it.
You are forbidden to look away. This traces back to the Renaissance master Pico della Mirandola and his terrifying philosophical concept of radical self-determination.
Oh, Pico's idea that humans aren't fixed in some rigid cosmic hierarchy.
Exactly. Pico argued that animals have a fixed instinctual nature and angels have a fixed divine nature. But humanity was left entirely open-ended by the Creator. We have the terrifying freedom to degenerate into mindless beasts or ascend to the level of the divine.
And Levy takes this.
Levy takes this existential freedom and makes it the functional mechanism of the Magos. Because you are free, you are responsible for everything. The magician must integrate every single force in existence, the supernal light of the highest heavens and the infernal grotesque dregs of the earth.
You can't leave anything out.
You have to take the raw, chaotic poison of disparate phenomena and metabolize it into the unified gold of the great work.
That is terrifying.
It is. Because if you ignore a single link in the chain, if you refuse to look at a piece of reality simply because it offends your sensibilities, the entire system collapses on your head. The ignored force becomes a blind spot, and that blind spot will be the exact thing that destroys your equilibrium.
I just marvel at the sheer intellectual ruthlessness of that demand. And think about what that means for us today. In our modern era, we are drowning in constant information overload.
Oh, complete.
We live in algorithmic echo chambers designed to protect us from things we don't like. Levy's mandate is a profound call to intellectual bravery.
It really is.
It is so incredibly easy to curate our feeds, to block out adverse intelligence, to ignore the demons of opposing viewpoints, and safely retreat into a cozy bubble of things we already agree with.
But Levy is warning us that if you do that, you forfeit your power entirely.
Right. To be a true initiate, to actually exert your will on reality, you must face the friction. You have to be intimately acquainted with the light and the dark.
It is an aggressive, gritty sort of optimism, even if it initially sounds like a pessimistic trap. You empty yourself of your petty ego, but you engage fiercely and fearlessly with the totality of existence. That is how you ride the chariot through the material wilderness without flipping over.
So let's distill this massive journey we've been on. We started with the overwhelming, exhausting tension of being pulled between extremes in our daily lives.
Right.
What Ben Hod's curation of Levy's Map 2 teaches us is that duality is not a flaw in the system. It is the generator of society, of laws, of light, and a manifestation itself.
Exact.
Magic, in this high, rigorous, esoteric sense, isn't about escaping reality into some formless, floating void of pure unity. It's about standing in the dead center of opposing forces, the active and the passive, the live wire and the resistor, Jachin and Boaz, to finally grasp the light of gnosis.
And practically, it requires you to be the active, polarizing agent in your own life.
Yeah.
The opposing forces you face every single day, the obstacles, the people who push back against you, are not barriers keeping you from your life. They are the two columns of your own personal temple. They are absolutely required to keep your roof from collapsing.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with, and it builds on a really fascinating detail from the sources.
Okay, what is it?
The text mentions that Levy deeply studied the work of his contemporary, Michael Faraday. You know, the mid-19th century physicist who was formulating the foundational theories of electromagnetic polarity and invisible force fields.
Right, a giant of science.
And Levy didn't look at Faraday's hard science as debunking his magic. He saw it as physical, empirical proof of hermetic principles. To Levy, the astral light was essentially an omnipresent field of binary tension.
A literal, measurable, cosmic fluid of polarization, attraction, and repulsion.
Exactly. It's a circuit.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to today. If modern quantum physics and computer science continue to prove that our entire reality, the universe itself, might just be a complex, holographic interplay of binary information,
Just endless data.
literally an endless matrix of ones and zeros, of active force and passive form, on and off, then aren't the software engineers and quantum physicists of today unknowingly practicing Levy's high magic every single time they sit at a keyboard?
Oh, wow.
They're mathematically manipulating the ultimate duality to manifest a new reality on the screen.
It's a stunning realization to sit with. The architecture of the cosmos hasn't changed at all since Solomon's Temple. We have just found a new digital language to describe the two columns.
So the next time you feel utterly exhausted by the tension in your life, by the pull of those two extremes, remember that friction isn't breaking you. It's the exact cosmic machinery required to create your reality. Stand in the center and don't look away.
I drew a line through the midnight dust, split the darks to feel it move. Cold on my teeth, iron in my lungs. One hit